I want you to take a second and just think back to the precise moment you woke up this morning.
Right.
I'm talking about that liminal space, right before you reach to your phone, before you even fully open your eyes.
Hmm.
What was the very first thought that occupied your mind?
That's a revealing question.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because for a tiny fraction of the population, maybe it was like a profound reflection on personal growth or some strategic thought about how to genuinely improve the community.
Sure, maybe for a select few.
Right. But if we are being completely honest with ourselves, for the vast majority of us, that initial waking thought was likely tethered to a very specific, inescapable theme.
Money.
Exactly. It might have been loud and obvious, like, how am I going to pay for that car repair? Or maybe it was subtle, like, if I get this project done early, maybe that bumps me into the higher bonus tier.
Yeah, but it all circles back.
It all circles back to one fundamental gravitational center, which is financial survival and accumulation. Welcome to episode 62 of Time Traveler's Paradox. In today's deep dive, we're exploring the quiet erosion of human values.
Because that financial calculation, it essentially functions as the universal operating system for modern human consciousness. From the moment the alarm goes off, that underlying math dictates almost every subsequent action, interaction, and, prioritization throughout your day.
And that pervasive reality is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at some incredible source material, sociological, neurological, economic analyses, and we're investigating how this relentless daily preoccupation with financial survival isn't just like an economic reality.
No, it's way deeper than that.
It is physically reshaping human biology. It's altering the architecture of our brains. And by extension, it's quietly shifting the entire evolutionary trajectory of human civilization. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really understand the sheer scale of this biological shift, we have to recognize the absurdity of our current baseline.
Which is?
That we are organizing the entirety of human biological potential around a relatively recent, entirely fabricated tool. Early human societies invented currency just to solve logistical friction problem.
Right, because bartering a cow for a wagon was just incredibly inefficient.
Exactly. So money was introduced simply as a neutral lubricant for the exchange of goods. It possesses zero intrinsic biological value.
None at all.
The paper, the coins, and certainly the digital pixels on your banking app, they only hold power because of a massive, globally sustained collective hallucination. We all just agree to pretend it has value.
I look at it a lot like the evolution of our technology. It's like we invented a steering wheel to control a car, right? So we could choose our own destination.
Sure.
But eventually, somewhere along the line, the steering wheel became sentient, locked the doors, and just started deciding the destination for us.
That's a great way to put it.
We are basically just strapped into the passenger seat at this point.
Right.
When you actually observe modern life, that tool dictates the absolute boundaries of the human experience.
It really does. What's fascinating here is how society has completely normalized organizing an entire human life around this collective illusion.
Yeah.
We run our romantic partnerships through the filter of credit scores and earning potential.
Oh, absolutely.
We decide whether or not to have kids based on housing market forecasts. People literally abandon their creative passions because they lack a clear monetization funnel.
Because if it doesn't make money, society views it as a hobby
Yeah.
or just a waste of time.
Right. The steering wheel analogy perfectly captures the systemic surrender. The tool definitively became the master.
Yeah.
The vast majority of individuals do not direct their money. The pursuit of money directs their lives. It establishes the perimeter of what they believe is even possible.
But that begs a massive question for me. If it's just a shared hallucination, and we rationally know that a bank balance is just data sitting on a server somewhere in Virginia, why does a dip in that data feel so catastrophic?
That's the core issue right there.
Yeah. Like, we know we aren't literally under attack, but a surprise tax bill or a rumor about corporate layoffs sends the human body into an absolute tailspin. Why does it have such a stranglehold on us?
Well, the answer lies in how our bodies process modern threats. Because economics is a relatively new invention, right? But your nervous system is running on ancient hardware.
The evolutionary stuff.
Exactly. Your body's threat detection system evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to deal with immediate physical dangers.
So like a hostile tribe or a lack of shelter or a literal predator chasing you.
Right. Your nervous system is highly optimized to keep you alive in those specific scenarios. But in the modern paradigm, basic biological survival, getting food, maintaining shelter, accessing medical care, all of that is entirely gated by money.
You literally cannot fulfill basic biological imperatives without it.
Exactly. And consequently, your nervous system has just completely conflated the two.
So wait, does that mean the brain doesn't bother distinguishing between a late fee and mortal danger? Are you saying the physiological cascade that happens when I look at a past due notice is functionally identical to being hunted?
On a neurochemical level, there is virtually no distinction.
Wow.
When your brain perceives a threat to your financial stability, the amygdala fires. And we know the amygdala doesn't do nuance.
Right, it's just an alarm bell.
It doesn't care about the macroeconomic factors of inflation, It just sounds the universal biological alarm. And the moment that happens, your endocrine system floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline.
Survival mode.
Pure survival mode. Your heart rate accelerates, your digestion slows down, and your entire biological machine shifts violently away from baseline equilibrium.
I really want to look at the cognitive cost of that shift because, neurological bandwidth is a zero-sum game, right?
Yes.
If the alarm bells are blaring and the body is flooded with cortisol, something else has to be powering down. So we're in survival mode. What gets pushed out? Does chronic financial anxiety literally make us less moral and less creative?
It absolutely does, by starving the prefrontal cortex of resources.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So the prefrontal cortex manages our executive functions. It's the engine behind deep empathy, long-term strategic planning, complex moral reasoning, and creative problem solving.
All the high-level human stuff.
Exactly. But running those high-level algorithms requires massive amounts of metabolic energy.
And if you're running from a predator, you don't need to be writing a symphony.
Right. When the amygdala declares a state of emergency, the brain essentially decides that pondering the ethical implications of a business decision is a waste of precious energy. It aggressively reroutes blood flow and resources away from the prefrontal cortex and pushes them toward the motor cortex and the primitive survival structures.
So you are essentially locked out of your own higher cognitive abilities. It's almost like the brain treats high-level morality and creativity as luxury functions that just get immediately cut during a biological budget crisis.
That is the tragedy of it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that high-level traits like compassion, honesty, and the intrinsic desire to elevate humanity, they don't vanish.
Humans aren't just inherently devoid of them.
No, but those capacities are rendered inaccessible, they get sidelined. You just cannot operate from your highest moral or intellectual baseline when your nervous system is convinced you are in imminent mortal danger.
But, here is the critical flaw in how our bodies handle this, right? That ancient survival response was designed to be acute and temporary.
A brief burst of energy to survive?
Exactly. Think of a localized kitchen grease fire. The heat triggers the overhead fire sprinkler, it dumps water for 3 minutes, the fire's extinguished, and the system shuts off.
And your cortisol drops.
Right, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and you go about your day. But modern financial anxiety isn't a 3-minute grease fire. It's like having that fire sprinkler system stuck on a slow, persistent drip, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The rent is always due. The inflation metrics are always ticking up.
Yeah, you are living in a permanent, low-grade state of emergency. Which leads me to wonder what happens to the physical structure of the brain when this emergency never turns off.
Well, that continuous dripping leads us directly into the structural consequences. It's one thing to experience a temporary flood of stress hormones. It's an entirely different biological phenomenon when that state never resolves.
Because of neuroplasticity.
Exactly. The sources focus heavily on how this persistent state intersects with the brain's neuroplasticity. The fundamental rule there is that neurons that fire together wire together.
Meaning the brain becomes what it practices.
Yes. The brain physically remodels its own architecture based on whatever cognitive patterns are repeated most frequently.
So we are talking about actual structural adaptation here. If billions of people are waking up and running this financial scarcity algorithm in their heads every single day, they aren't just experiencing fleeting thoughts.
No, they are actively thickening the neural pathways dedicated to hypervigilance, scarcity, and fear.
Wow.
If a human mind practices the pursuit of accumulation every day, the brain adapts by becoming structurally wired for endless wanting.
The brain literally wires itself to just want more.
Right. And then, the dopamine receptors recalibrate to demand constant financial validation just to maintain a baseline equilibrium. And when we extrapolate that out to a global scale, we start to understand modern civilization.
Because society is simply the aggregate output of billions of human brains acting out their underlying wiring.
Precisely. When the overwhelming majority of those brains have been systematically wired for scarcity and the relentless accumulation of a survival token, society transforms to perfectly reflect those traits.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. A lot of critics, especially in classical economics, will push back on this by arguing that this is just innate human nature.
Ah, the greed is human nature argument.
Yeah, they'll say humans are inherently greedy and territorial. We are biologically wired to hoard resources. But the text completely dismantles that argument using the blank slate theory.
It really does.
Because if you observe an infant, there is zero biological imperative to maximize quarterly profits. A toddler isn't evaluating the room based on the earning potential of the other toddlers or checking stock prices.
Right. The drive for endless financial accumulation is entirely absent from our factory settings. It is a highly specific, socially engineered operating system that gets installed over time.
And the installation process is incredibly stealthy. It happens through environmental programming.
From the very beginning.
Yeah, it's downloaded from stressed parents who constantly argue about credit card bills at the dinner table. It gets reinforced by an educational system that reduces a child's entire intellectual worth to a standardized grade, heavily implying that this grade is the only path to a secure salary.
And it's continuously updated by a hyper-consumerist culture.
A culture that constantly whispers more into every ear from the moment we can understand language, aggressively bombarding us with the message that safety, status, and love are all trapped behind a paywall.
The insidious nature of that programming lies in its timing. The subconscious mind absorbs these associative links between money, survival, and self-worth years before the conscious mind, the prefrontal cortex, is developed enough to critically question them.
It just sinks right in.
Yeah. By the time an individual reaches adulthood, the compulsion to accumulate doesn't feel like a learned behavior. It feels like an undeniable, objective reality.
But if we acknowledge that it is just software, that means it can be uninstalled or rewritten.
This raises an important question, though. If these desires feel like reality but are actually just installed software, how do we go about rewriting that code?
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second, based on some of the conflicting views in the text. If we actually manage to strip away the financial treadmill, don't we lose the primary engine of human progress?
That's a very common pushback.
Right, like isn't the drive to earn what pushes people to work hard and innovate? Without it, wouldn't society just stagnate because there's no monetary carrot dangling in front of us?
It's a fair challenge, and the answer is yes, ambition is good. The drive to improve, to create, to contribute, these are some of humanity's greatest qualities. But notice the subtle shift that just happened there.
What do you mean?
Well, I said ambition, and you said the desire to earn. Are those really the same thing?
Oh, I see.
The text differentiates between ambition and the desire to earn. A scientist seeking to cure a disease is ambitious. An artist trying to create something beautiful is ambitious. A teacher dedicating decades to educating children is ambitious.
Because they are creating value.
Exactly. Healthy ambition is about creating value for the world. The problem arises when ambition is narrowly redefined as financial accumulation.
So the breakdown happens when we conflate the two.
Right. We take this beautiful, multifaceted human desire to contribute, and we flatten it into a single gamified metric. And in doing so, we hijack the brain's natural reward system.
The dopamine system.
Yes. In our current architecture, the massive dopamine spike doesn't come from the positive impact of the work or the mastery of a skill. It comes from the direct deposit hitting the account or watching a stock portfolio turn green.
So what does this all mean?
It means we've completely weaponized the dopamine loop.
Yeah, you look at retail trading apps that shoot digital confetti across the screen when you execute a trade, or the social media flex culture where self-worth is entirely tied to displaying luxury assets. It's gamified dopamine extraction.
It really is.
We've taken the complex human desire for purpose and turned it into a slot machine. And because cognitive bandwidth and attention are finite resources, if that dopamine treadmill consumes all our energy, there's nothing left in the tank for curiosity or human flourishing.
That is exactly the point. If a person spends 80 or 90% of their daily cognitive energy navigating this hijacked treadmill, stressing over inflation, chasing the next promotion, monitoring investments, there is barely any energy left in the reservoir.
You literally don't have the metabolic energy left to be a deeply connected parent or an engaged citizen.
Which perfectly explains the devastating societal consequences highlighted in the source. Because from an objective, data-driven standpoint, we are living in a period of unprecedented abundance.
We really are the most technologically advanced, hyper-connected era in human history.
We possess technological capabilities that would look like magic to our ancestors. Instantaneous global communication, staggering agricultural output. By every logical measure, this should be the absolute peak of human flourishing.
But you walk outside, or you look at the public health data, and it is the exact opposite.
We are witnessing a catastrophic decline in mental well-being, epidemic levels of isolation and loneliness, surging rates of clinical anxiety and depression across basically every demographic. Institutional trust is evaporating.
It's all collapsing.
And the reason for this massive disconnect is that we have successfully optimized society for a metric that has absolutely nothing to do with human happiness.
We optimize for the tool.
Yes, we optimized for the steering wheel. And in doing so, we suppressed the very biological mechanisms that allow humans to experience deep connection and purpose.
We essentially traded our capacity for compassion and creativity for an artificial survival mechanism. It's a self-perpetuating cycle where the system keeps our brains in a perpetual state of fear and then demands that we soothe that fear by accumulating more of the exact thing that generated the anxiety in the first place.
It is the ultimate cognitive trap. We are trying to buy our way out of a biologically unnatural state of panic using the currency that is causing the panic.
Which brings us entirely out of the theoretical realm and right back into your daily life. Because this structural rewiring isn't just happening to society as some abstract concept, it is actively happening inside your own neural pathways today.
Right now.
So we want to invite you to conduct a little experiment tomorrow. From the moment you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to step back and act as an impartial observer of your own thoughts for a single day.
Just observe what occupies your mind.
Exactly. Track how many of your micro-decisions, your passing worries, and your daydreams trace their roots directly back to the financial treadmill. But more importantly, ask yourself what you have stopped noticing.
The negative space.
Yeah. While your brain has been locked on to calculating the numbers, what aspects of your life, your relationships, or your environment have quietly faded into the background because your prefrontal cortex simply didn't have the bandwidth to process them?
Because the biological reality is undeniable. Whatever you allow to occupy your mind is actively and physically reshaping the structure of your brain. Which leaves us with a pretty haunting question to consider as we wrap up.
Let's hear it.
If our brains are currently being physically reshaped by a biologically unnatural state of endless financial fear, imagine what entirely new, higher-level capacities of the human brain might unlock if we ever built a society where basic survival wasn't tied to money. If the financial predator went extinct, who would you actually become?